thank you for your presence today. In but a moment, John Sisk is going to introduce our panel, and I am simply here to say how grateful I am for your presence, how grateful I am for the presence of the Faith and Sports Institute and the various programs that it does both at our seminary and for our university and beyond. And then to invite those who are able to a lunch following. We would be grateful if you were able to stay. There will be ongoing conversation and an opportunity to get to know one another better. It seems to me that ours is a day when the opportunity to think carefully and faithfully about sport has never been more strategic. Who would have thought that so many would have been caught up in the women's NCAA basketball? Caitlin Clark is a household name, kind of like Sophia Young was in my day. I'm still inclined to go for an autograph, but I'm told that I don't have to do that anymore. So would you all welcome John Sisk?
Yeah, I'll ask our panelists to come on up. And Todd, I'm with you. I was told by Sophia to make sure I kept the intro short because she knows that if she didn't tell me that I would go on and on. So thanks for attending today. It means a lot just to have you here. And I'm going to do something I don't normally do. I'm going to have to pull up my phone as I prep for and deliver just the bios for our panelists this morning that we're thrilled to have alongside us as we think through today's topics. But I will start with our moderator today, Derek Smith. Derek is a 2005 Baylor graduate, so a Baylor Bear. Many of the backgrounds you'll hear are no surprise if you are a Baylor sports fan and in the room. But currently serving as brand strategy specialist for Baylor Marketing and Communications, while also coordinating coverage of the Baylor Connections podcast. Derek, no stranger to Baylor, currently serving as play-by-play broadcaster for Baylor baseball as well as women's basketball, also serving with the pre- and post-game radio coverage for football on game days, as well as the public address voice for both McLean Stadium and Farrell Center and the Pavilion as well. So true Baylor Bear as well. But yeah, he's doing a lot. Sophia Young, a 2005 Baylor grad as well, and a Baylor Athletics Hall of Fame member, a Texas Sports Hall of Fame member, and currently serving with women's basketball, Baylor women's basketball on the staff there. Sophia, a two-time All-American, led Baylor to the 2005 NCAA National Championship, and during her time is one of only 7 players in Baylor history to amass both 2,000 points and 1,000 rebounds in a career. So that's a lot of work there. And after her time at Baylor, went on to a career in the WNBA. Was selected with the 4th overall pick and played for the San Antonio Silver Stars and played over 300 games through 9 seasons with 3 WNBA All-Star selections. So a dedicated resume, to say the least. So thanks for being here, Sophia. Juliana, a student athlete from Ole Miss. So Ole Miss, and currently serving with Baylor Athletics in a role that is Executive Senior Associate Athletics Director for Mission, Impact, and Enrichment. So there you go. We got it right. And in the role, really serving to cultivate, develop, look for opportunities to promote spiritual growth for Baylor Athletics, both Baylor Athletics student athletes as well as staff members, caregivers, and any and all that are there. So in this role, also providing oversight to Baylor Athletic Sports Ministry efforts as a whole. So very busy. From, like I said, Ole Miss undergrad. From there, went on to about a decade with leadership roles in various organizations as well. So please help me welcome our panelists to the stage today. We're thrilled you guys are here, and thanks again. So I'll turn it over to Derek.
Thank you very much, John. And boy, y'all picked a couple good ones in Sophia and Juliana for sure. Excited for this conversation. So we have a Big 12 basketball player at Baylor, SEC track and field athlete, and All-American, right? All-American, yep, at Ole Miss. So they got it done on the field and off for sure. Well, let's dive right in here, and there's no better way to start off with a really broad question for you both, but you can take it any way you want it to go. I mean, faith and sports have both been a part of your lives for a long time. So, Sophia, I'll start with you. What are some of the ways that those two things have meaningfully intersected in your life?
Yes, when I was thinking about this question last night, I literally went back all the way to youth, and I thought, like, I wonder which one came first. Whether it was sports or whether it was faith. I grew up in a third world country, very Christian, and I've gone to church since I've known myself, but I've also played sports since I've known myself. So I wondered, like, what actually came first. But track and field was the love of my life. I ran 400, 200, 100, so that was the sport that I actually loved more than basketball. And I got baptized at age 15, and I came to the U.S. From there, and that's when I actually started playing basketball. So when I started thinking back at this, I read in my journal. I've always kept a journal. And a couple years ago, I went back and looked at some of the things that I wrote when I was in high school, and I wrote that I wanted to be an athlete that's standing on the stage telling people about Jesus. And so I remember coming here to Baylor, and I've often thought to myself, I knew that sometimes with being a Christian, there was this thing that you probably shouldn't be the boss, or you shouldn't be so bold or bossy. You have to be humble. But when I played, I wanted to be the best because I wanted people to follow me. I've never separated my faith from who I was. I've never looked at myself as I'm a Christian or I'm an athlete. To me, they were one and the same. And so what I knew that I wanted to be was a great Christian athlete. Like, I wanted to be the best player on my team. And so that was one of my heart's desire. And so I thought, like, well, if people are going to follow, like, I wanted them to follow me. So I've often made sure that I was consistent with my faith and when I played. So I made sure I showed up every day with a work ethic to say that I love Jesus and I'm going to work really hard and I'm going to push my teammates and I'm going to be determined to be the best. So there wasn't any like, oh, well, you know, I love Jesus, so I can't go too hard, you know. And so I carry that over all the way into my professional career, just being consistent with my faith and with my sport. So I've never really like looked at like sports and faith as in a separate entity in my life. I've always just kept it together because to me that's how I viewed it was that I got baptized and God blessed me with an opportunity to come to the U.S. So to me, they were like one and the same to say, okay, here's an opportunity to go out and showcase what I have done for you, what I am going to do through you. So.
And I'll ask you that same question, Juliana. Before I do, I'll ask Sophia a question that I want your answer on as well. Was there a point in your life when you thought sports, faith, I want this not just to be something I do in my teens and 20s, but as that calling forever? No. Because like I said, like it wasn't a separate thing for me to separate my faith. I did know that whenever I was on the big stage, I wanted to make sure that I represented Christ well. And one thing that I've often been aware of since I was a young person was that I didn't want when somebody saw me on stage and when they saw me personally that I was different. You know, I didn't want to be like proclaiming Jesus and then whenever they are with me and they're like, whoa,
do you really know Jesus? Like with my words and my action. So so that has been a consistent theme for me. I think as my career go along, I still want that to be like I am a Christian coach, right? It's not like I am a Christian and then a coach. It's both. It's one and the same.
Absolutely. Juliana, same questions for you. That intersection of faith and sport, where have those been meaningful in your life?
Sophia used the word consistent, and one of the things that just occurred to me in thinking about that is that like God and His love for me has been the most consistent thing in my life. And so in thinking about how I came to sport, I wasn't a late bloomer, but I didn't take sport seriously until high school, and then I realized I was really good and it got really fun. And so, but with that, I was raised in a church as well. And 2 days actually before I started my undergraduate career at Ole Miss, my brother was murdered. And one of the things that kept me, the only thing that kept me, was my faith and the consistency in how I felt my relationship with God took me through that period and beyond. And it was pretty amazing because as I progressed through my undergraduate career and then started in my professional career, my faith was always how I led. Even though Baylor's the first non-secular institution that I've worked at, it was such a big part of my leadership, and I think that really probably helped me to find success professionally sooner than one would have imagined. And I really appreciated that I never lost sight of why I was doing what I was doing. I just happened to be a college athletics professional. That was my kingdom purpose. Like that's how I served the Lord, was through this particular profession. And so I would say the two converged. Like that turning point was probably my brother's death, and still knowing, and the Holy Spirit really speaking to me directly and saying, you still have to go, because I wasn't going to go. I was going to stay close to home, be with my family. And one of the best things that happened for me was to leave my family at that time to go and truly only have the Lord to depend on in that time. So I would say, yeah, it's the consistency, less about like between my profession and my faith, but more about God through every season of my life.
You said obviously it was the right decision for you and that the Holy Spirit led you to go. Are there moments you felt like His reminder or faithfulness that like, hey, I'm still with you here and this is the right decision?
Absolutely, because this industry is not very easy, especially for someone who's a believer, and especially, like, I just got to Baylor in July, so for the first 12 years of my career, being a Christian, working in a high performance-based sort of industry can be difficult and can challenge your what you believe to be true and your principles and your values. And I've had to make shifts in my career when there was too much of a departure between how I was expected to function professionally and what my personal values were.
I've got to ask you, track and field athlete, running the race, that's the one sport mentioned in the Bible. Has that ever been particularly meaningful to you in any specific ways, or did you ever feel that when you were out there getting ready to run, or any activities you participated in on the track and field?
One thing that y'all probably don't know about me is that I'm super honest. And unlike Sophia, I did not love track. To the day that I finished track, I did not love anything about it except winning. And and so I would say I was blessed to have an event coach who I threw the weight and the hammer. And for those who don't know, you spin around in circles and throw heavy things into a field. But I had a coach who was a believer, an event coach who was a believer, and a head coach who was a believer. And I never once felt the pressure to depart from what was most important to me, which was winning with integrity and doing what was asked from me, setting a good example. Much of the things that Sophia talked about, there were times that was really hard. My coach will tell you, my freshman year, she'll say I had 6 legal throws or legal marks. I believe it was more than that. But I, at that point, was planning to go home. I said, I'm going to try a year. I'm just going to go home if I don't like it. I don't know how I just showed back up my sophomore year. Like, I can't tell you the process. I can't say the Holy Spirit told me to go. I literally just returned to campus. And that year, I won the SEC championship, coming from a season where I barely got any legal marks and was barely written in the record books as participated on the team. So just knowing God's grace and consistency in my life and seeing how when I was just faithful and obedient, that like He continued to remind me that I was walking in His will for my life.
And of course, to help lead you both here, where you're now working with student athletes who are kind of walking similar paths to what you all did, let's dive into what you do here at Baylor. And Juliana, start with you. And we're talking about mission impact and enrichment. What does that look like?
Great question. We're still figuring it out. So that term was actually developed when my role came to be this summer. And really, it's the crossroads of sports ministry or spiritual growth, and the concept of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and how, from a biblical framework of justice and equity, do we grow spiritually and make room for all to belong and be able to live out what their purpose is, and how Baylor Athletics can help them do that while their folks are in our care, whether they be staff members or student athletes. So that's the biggest portion of my role. And then I also serve as the women's basketball sport administrator, where, I don't know, I keep things in order. I don't know, how would you describe it, Sophia? Yeah, so I help the head coach essentially reports to me, and we work as partners in how the program is led and operates and things of that nature, making sure things are consistent with the experiences that we want for our student athletes throughout the year, and has nothing to do with on-the-court stuff because I was not very good at basketball.
Your role, you work with others in the athletic department and with students. What's that mixture look like?
Yeah, so I also serve on the executive leadership team within the athletics department, and one of the, I would say, main roles that I play in that room is to be a constant reminder of how we say we're going to do things, because as you all may have heard or read, there are a lot of things happening in college athletics right now that are shifting how we've done sport in higher education, and it is amazing to be at a place like Baylor where we aren't afraid to say we like winning, but also aren't afraid to say that we love Jesus Christ. And so making sure that as we adapt to the changes and challenges that are happening in our industry, that are happening with our student athletes in their lives individually, that we don't forget our why. And so everyone in that room has that responsibility, but I think because my position is solely based in spiritual growth and equity and inclusion, I feel it as my personal responsibility as we're going through our decision-making process, as we're going through our planning, to remind us and keep us staying focused on our true north.
Sophia, what about you? Director of Player Development with the women's basketball program and assistant coach.
Yeah, so the NCAA passed a rule last year that we can now have 6 assistant coaches. So I am one of those 6, and I'm also director of player development, and that is to get our athletes ready for life after college athletics is over. Because within this 4-year period of time, if you can reflect back, we think that this is forever, or that 4-year time is like the length of life, right? But there's like so many more years to live after it's all over. And so my role is to just remind our student athletes to take advantage of the opportunities that they're given here. So I provide mentorship, spiritual growth and mentorship in that area, making sure that they connect to the right people, and being an assistant coach, being able to help out on the court as well. So it has been a journey for me to these last 3 years of learning what college athletics is like from this angle. Being an athlete, you don't really know all the ins and outs of what a coaches actually go through, and being also in this role, being able to talk and counsel our athletes whenever they're on the highs and when they're on the lows. That's also important. So I wish I had someone like me in my role when I was actually playing, because I feel like there will be so much things that I would not have done And I think that I would have been guided. I think I probably could have been better than what I actually was. I probably could have put up 3,000 points, instead of 2. But yes, that's what I do.
I want to ask you both, you all have very busy jobs. Everyone in here is very busy in some way, right? And there's always that mix of the administrative versus what's got to get done versus those unscripted moments that pop up. Sophia, what's that look like for you? I know you're very much one-on-one with the student athletes in a lot of ways.
Well, there's a lot of stuff that's unscripted, in college athletics with women's basketball, with women in general. We're very emotional people. And so there's a lot of, you got to talk people down off the ledge a lot of times. And, basketball is such an emotional game. And most of our athletes at times, we do well when things are going well. We do well when we score a lot of points. And if we don't, then it's like, oh my gosh, I'm depressed, right? Because a lot of our players' identity is in the game, is in their performance, not just for themselves, but for what the expectations are from their family, from their peers, from the outside world. So being a constant presence for them to be encouraging in the highs and the lows is I think so meaningful to just kind of to develop that relationship with our athletes. So that's one of the things that I cherish the most in my role is the relationship that I get to have with these young people, and to be able to speak life into them whenever things are going good and whenever things are going bad. So I am truly, truly beyond blessed that God had given me this opportunity to do this, because there's so many things that I didn't realize that I needed for myself to be able to grow and to become the coach that I want to be from this experience.
What about you, Juliana? I know you're there with our women's basketball players on the road into different places, but you also have that responsibility throughout the department. There's over, 500 student athletes that call Baylor home.
Yes, and I'm so grateful for the sports ministry team because they carry the biggest, I guess, burden when it relates to the one-on-one mentorship and discipleship of our student athletes, and pouring into and equipping our coaches and how they lead our student athletes. And so I try not to get in the way of that, but also try to make sure from an administrative level that I'm providing them with the resources that they need to do that work and do it well and do it uninhibited. And so I see my space as someone who provides resources, someone who equips them, and someone who reports back to our executive leadership team, making sure they understand the work that's being done and making sure that we aren't making decisions or doing things that are working counter to what we're doing on that one-on-one basis in our chapel classes and things like that. And then also, I feel as though, to a certain extent, I provide a level of mentorship and coaching and advising to our staff members who I'm most directly connected with. That'd be women's basketball staff, some of the student athletes, and just those colleagues that I have around. Given that my responsibilities include spiritual growth for the entire department, it kind of I try to see myself as a wayfinder to help folks lead them in the right place or person, resource, that sort of thing.
To steward these positions the way you both want to, you've got to be plugged into your faith, disciplines that are healthy for you, and there's a lot of different ways you could take this, but Juliana, first for you, what are some of the ways that you've got to make sure you're being fed with what you need to in turn serve others?
Yeah, that's a great question. My quiet time is non-negotiable, so I'm typically up at 5 a.m. because that's when the world is the quietest for me, and just spend intentional time with the Lord. And I do that and that's the one thing that I feel like has been consistent in my life for a number of years, because no matter where I am, no matter what my responsibilities are, I have that time for me and God, and it makes me better, or it better equips me for the folks in the things that I'm responsible for throughout the day. So that's one way. I am still on my quest to find a local church, but at my last stop when I was in Syracuse, New York, was super plugged into my church, and my church community was so important to balancing the high sensory nature of college athletics. There's always something going on, someone who needs to be tended to, something that needs to be assessed. some tough conversation that needs to happen. And my church people, my actual like church gathering, all of those things were so important to balance out what I was managing on a day-to-day basis in the office.
What about you, Sophia?
Whenever we first came back to Waco, my family and I, one of the first things that we did was to try to find a church that we can plug into, because it was so important. Like, it was get a job here at Baylor, and then now we got to find a church. So we've been connected to Glory Bell Church for the last 3 years, and we are very involved in that. And my husband and I are on the leadership team at their church, just building community there, because that's very important for my family and I. Like Juliana said, quiet time is a non-negotiable for my mental health, dealing with two young children, and I get up at a time also when they are asleep. Although sometimes they try to come into my space, so that can be a challenge. I'm like, get out, I gotta pray. And it's like, you're talking to Jesus, so you shouldn't be so mean, mommy. But the quiet time is an absolute non-negotiable for me, just for that mental health a space, because to deal with all the challenges that Juliana says, and we do have a lot. Maybe we're being very cautious, right, in how we say things. But in college athletics, there's so many challenges that comes up on a daily basis that we have to be spiritually and mentally guarded before we come out and is able to interject life into others, because it can also be draining. This role can also be very, very draining, time consuming. So we have to be mindful that we are always connected to the Spirit. And I remember there are times when I'm in my quiet time and I'm like, okay, I'm praying for all our athletes, and then the Holy Spirit will say, go talk to this person today, or go give a note today, or go do this, take this person to lunch today. I had no idea what they were dealing with, right? But those times, when you listen and you actually do what the Holy Spirit says, and you're like, oh my gosh, this was so cool, right? Because it made a difference. And those times when you don't listen, you don't know what you missed out on. So I think that those quiet times in the morning have been so instrumental for me in this role, to be able to see what the athletes are going through without them telling me that this is what they're dealing with. So,
well, let's talk about some of those things that our student athletes are facing. College athletics is changing. Juliana, you mentioned that. The pressures and resources and opportunities to students are changing for good and bad. So how has it changed, Sophia, first to you? Since you were here in, 02 to 03 to 06 in there, how have things changed? What stands out to you?
Well, we had Facebook and MySpace, and those were challenging. So my husband that last night, I was like, yeah, we had MySpace, and that was so hard. But the social media that our athletes face today, the social pressure that they face today is beyond, like, I still don't comprehend it. I really don't. Like, I don't get what they actually have to deal with, and the competition that they have within each other, within the team, and obviously with the world. So that is a challenge to be able to keep up with, and the pressures in itself to perform. I know we had an athlete here at one point where she didn't do well, and the comments that was said to her on her social platform was just so mind-blowing to me. And the thing about it, for us, in my age, you're like, well, just get off of it, don't read it. But to them, they cannot not read it, right? Because it's so important for them to be able to keep up this image, and so they have to go in and comment. So those are challenges that for us, whenever we are there, to be present with them, on a daily basis when they're when they don't have their phones, just to be an encouraging light, to just kind of remind them that, hey, we love you, and we see you, like not the people who you don't know who are commenting on your pages that you'll never ever see, right? But we're present with you, and we want to be here for you. We want to make sure that you succeed, and there's life beyond this point in your journey. So, and again, that's why it's important for me to stay. Have my quiet time so I can know what the Holy Spirit is telling me to say that can be uplifting from whatever they went through that night before, or or that week before. So it's a challenge that social media, I think, is one thing, and I'm sure Julie's has others, but for me in our program, it's a big challenge.
Yeah, I think I would say generally the need and desire for validation is amplified way more now than when I was a student athlete. And I think it's a byproduct of social media and the instant gratification or affirmation that one might feel like they receive on a post with a like or a comment or things like that. And so it requires really our coaches to be sensitive to their communication style with our student athletes, because if you aren't continually affirming and validating, it can be perceived as being not worthy, can be perceived as them doing something completely wrong or not up to the standard, where part of this is personal. I think part of this is generational. My parents are in their 70s, so I'm pretty young for folks that are in their 70s as far as it being a child, but I was around wiser, older people for a lot of my life. And you did what you needed to do and you moved on. There wasn't a great job, you did it very often back in the day. And I think without having that, in the absence of that, it can spiral or snowball into something that isn't intended for it to be for our student athletes. And so just thinking about what that means for how we lead and how we coach them through seeking their identity in something other than their sport or something other than, which is, Christ. And so it is hard, because I feel as though coaches and administrators of a certain generation, it's hard for them to adjust to this new type of encouragement, because it's different. It's different, and it might seem over the top and unnecessary, but it is necessary. I will also say, and I will acknowledge I'm not a parent, parents are also becoming a bigger problem, because I feel like a lot of the pressure that our student athletes face does come from the home. It does come from folks who love them dearly and want them to succeed, and that can be hard to balance as well. So I'll just leave that there.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on what Julian has just said, it's like that daily. It's a daily encouragement. You know how we talk about parents back in the day? It's like, well, I told you I love you once. Like, why do I need to tell you again? It's been 20 years. Like, why do I? I still love you, But not so much with our athletes today. Like, we literally have to be there every single day to just, hey, you're good enough. I know you're good enough. You can do this. And the one day you didn't do it, they're like, you don't love me. And I'm like, oh, I told you yesterday. But yeah, so that's also, it's a big challenge.
What about just the challenging nature of how much college sports are changing? It's so rapid, and it seems like every day there's something new in the news about NIL or conference realignment or TV money. I don't know how much the players experience that or how much each of you do in your roles, but I know the people around you certainly are. Does that play a role in where you're able to speak into things?
Absolutely.
This is all her.
Yeah, it's like this every day, every meeting. So yes, college athletics has always been challenging. And I believe that one of the ways in which we, specifically Baylor athletics, how we're positioned, can continue to stay grounded in this season is to not forget who we are and why we do what we do. And I think we're being so intentional about that as we prepare for these shifts, as we prepare for student athletes to possibly become employees, as we prepare for what it might look like to only regularly have student athletes on campus for a year because they're able to transfer without having to sit a year. Things that are really great to in giving student athletes autonomy over their careers and their lives, but can be really disruptive for people who are invested in developing students from freshman year to senior year, and you need that time. Like 1 year is really quick to try to build a relationship and really set down some foundation for like lasting relationships, which is like the reason why a lot of us are in this sort of profession. So with the challenges, I think it's just really important that we just continue to remember and function as though we are here to invite folks into relationship with Christ, and for them to have deepened relationship through Christ, and allow them to do that and express that through their sport that they love.
For individuals in here, people who might be going into sport in some way, what advice would you give if they're thinking about following that calling into sport ministry in some way?
I think that the first thing is to find a mentor, someone who they admire, who is doing the work that they want to do, and they are everywhere. Sometimes when you're in a public institution, you're not as vocal with your faith, but I think those things become evident with the way that you are, if you're not separating yourself from your faith, right, and from what you do. So I think that will be my main advice, is to find a mentor. And secondly, I think whenever it comes to like growing in your faith and understanding who you are in Christ, and not wavering, right? Not wavering in the decisions that you make with who you are and who you want to become. Because, in this industry, there's so many different times when you have to really decide, is this a decision that's going to mess up my career? Is it going to grow my career? If I make this decision, would my career grow? But how would I feel as a person? How would I feel as in with the person that I want to become? And that is a moral decision that you really literally have to choose. Sometimes being a coach is making a decision that is not aligned with your integrity, right? So those kind of decisions, I think that as you grow and want to pursue, is making sure that that you want to follow Jesus and that he is pleased with you. So that can at times mean that you don't take that job, right? And even though it could be so great for your career, but I've heard so many people talked about, so many athletic directors, assistant ADs talk about not taking a job because of finances, or not taking a job because you like somebody, making sure that it's in alignment with who you want to become. And not just in that present moment, right? But thinking about your future. So my two advices, making sure you find a mentor, but deciding who you want to become whenever you are taking on a role.
That's so good. There's so much I could say here. The first piece of advice, and this is not what I wrote down in my prep note card, is to not be enamored by the brand. That's a pretty practical piece of advice. But I was an SEC student athlete. I worked at the University of Oklahoma, right? So there's this brand sort of prestige that's often idolized in college athletics. And the funny thing is that when I went to Oklahoma, I didn't know Oklahoma was Oklahoma. I'm like, I'm an SEC athlete. I grew up 45 minutes from the University of Georgia. Like, what is Oklahoma? But when I got there, I was one of like 70 graduate assistants in the athletics department. And I could see the difference in my perception of working at Oklahoma and some of my colleagues' perception of, oh my gosh, we work at OU. Like, this is the greatest thing ever. I'm never leaving this place. And what happens when you're enamored by the brand of an institution or athletics department is that you oftentimes don't ask the critical questions or see the things that you need to see in order to make a decision about whether or not you want to align your career or yourself with that place or those people. And so I would say that would be piece of advice number one. Number two is just be so sure about who you are and what you contribute to a department and what your values are. And at the point which those two depart from what you're asked to do and what you know is right in your heart and your spirit, you have to trust God to make the aligned decision to do it differently. And at that point where it doesn't work there, then it might be the end. And you have to be okay with that. And that's one of the things I'm so grateful to the Holy Spirit about is that twice I've left roles before folks thought I should leave them because I just was not willing to acquiesce or bend, and God showed up over and above what I would have tried to do in my own sort of strength in those situations. So.
Wonderful. Well, I know some of y'all may have questions for them. I know there's going to be that chance here at lunch in just a little bit. Final question. You're excited about the future of Baylor athletics and what's coming up next because why?
Because of the people. You know, we talk about relationships and that we've built. For us being on the staff, the people that Baylor are hiring, it looks like we are being intentional with bringing in the right people to help with the trajectory of the program. The resources that Baylor is also, looking to get involved in. I think that is going to draw more people to Baylor, to the athletic department. You know, Waco's growing, so that's bringing in more fans. So I think people and the resources is going to be pivotal for the growth of Baylor, and we're just trying extremely hard, especially in this time of college athletics, to bring in the right athletes and to build a relationship with the 8 months that we have. Sometimes it's not a year. With the 8 months that we have, and hopefully leave a great impression on them, even whether they decide to stay or leave.
I think I alluded to this earlier, but Baylor University is uniquely positioned, I feel, to be a guiding light in this time in college athletics. And I know that the student athletes who come here, who are in our care, whether it's 8 months, whether it's 4 years, leave knowing that it was different if they had been somewhere else, or if they know colleagues who are at other institutions. And they might not be able to put their finger on it, they might not be able to articulate it when they get here or while they're here. There's just something about this place. And I'm excited about our opportunity to draw more people to Christ, to invite more people into relationship with Christ, whether that happens while they're here or after they leave here, because it allows us as staff members to talk openly about it and to share testimony and to do those things that aren't happening on other campuses and high-performing athletics departments.
1 second. And I'm glad Juliana finished with that, because you talk about building relationships. Sometimes we have it for 2 years, 3 years. Sometimes we have it for 8 months. And for just a quick, update testimony from one of our athletes, she's been with us for a while, and kind of believed, not really. And so for me, in my role of, being that spiritual guide for them, I don't push Jesus. You need to accept Jesus or go to hell. We don't say that, but we allow people to journey with Christ at their own pace. And so this athlete came up to me. We had coffee a few weeks ago, and she was like, "It's not that I've never believed. I've always felt like, there's a God, and I wanted to, and He's pursuing me now." And so she's just like, "I have a question. There's so many people in this world? 7 billion people. Why does God care about me? You know. So in those moments, because we have journeyed in these last few years together, and being consistent with that encouragement, with that love, with that care. Now she really gets to open up to ask these simple questions, but it's a big deal, it's a big deal for her as God continues to open up to her and reveal himself to her. Those are the moments where you're just like excited about the journey for what God is taking her on. And I'm happy that I was a part of that, to be there for her, where I never, shoved Jesus on her, but allow God to just reveal himself to her at his own time and his own pace. And so now she's like, I want to go to church. So we're making progress.
That's great. Yeah, very meaningful for sure. Well, we can continue this as we eat here momentarily and visit even a little bit more so. But let's hear it for Sophia and Juliana. They're doing incredible work, and glad we can share this.